The thermometer read minus 38 degrees Celsius when Jack Matthews made the decision that would change everything. He was standing in the line shack, watching his breath turn to ice crystals in the air, and he knew they had maybe 2 hours before the real cold hit, the kind of cold that kills. It was January 1883, and Jack was leading 5 cowboys on what should have been a routine cattle drive through Montana territory. 200 head of cattle, 15 miles to the main ranch. Good money for winter work. But Jack had been watching the sky all morning, and everything in his gut told him they'd waited too long. His second in command was Thomas Chen, a Chinese immigrant who knew more about cattle and weather than any 3 cowboys combined. Thomas had been quiet all morning, which was never a good sign. The others were younger men. Billy Reeves, barely 19, who talked constantly about the girl he'd marry in spring. Marcus Webb, a former Buffalo soldier who'd chosen the hard freedom of cowboy life. And Dutch, a German immigrant they could barely understand but who worked harder than anyone. Thomas found Jack by the stove. "We need to move now, not toward the ranch. We need real shelter." Jack felt his stomach drop. How bad? The Blackfeet call it the breath of the White Death. Comes down from the Arctic maybe once in a generation. Thomas shook his head slowly. Maybe 50 below, maybe worse. At 50 below, spit freezes before it hits the ground. Exposed skin dies in minutes. Horses freeze while they're still walking. "The Anderson place," Jack said. The old trading post 8 miles east, built like a fort with stone walls. Abandoned for 2 years, but solid. Their only chance. "Mister, Harrison paid us to bring these cattle in," Billy protested, his voice cracking. "Then we lose them," Jack said. "But we don't lose ourselves. We ride in 5 minutes." What Jack didn't tell them was that 8 miles in that cold might as well be 80. They mounted up as the first real winds hit. The temperature was falling so fast, Jack could feel it through 3 layers of wool. His mustache formed icicles, his eyelashes stuck together when he blinked. Behind them, the cattle clustered together, but Jack knew it wouldn't be enough. The first hour was uncomfortable. The second became painful. By the third hour, it went beyond pain into something else entirely, where your body starts deciding which parts it can afford to lose. Dutch's horse went down first, just collapsed, its legs splaying out. They were only 4 miles from the trading post. They put Dutch on double with Billy, but now one horse carried 2 men's weight, burning through its reserves twice as fast. Thomas rode up beside Jack, ice forming in his beard. "We're not going to make it, not all of us." Jack wanted to argue, but he felt the truth in his bones. The wind drove the cold through every gap, stealing warmth faster than their bodies could generate it. Billy's horse struggled under double weight. Marcus's horse limped. Even Jack's mount stumbled. Then Marcus shouted and pointed. Through the swirling snow they saw a dark shape. Not the trading post, an old buffalo wallow, a depression maybe 6 feet deep and 20 feet across. Not shelter, not really, but something. They pulled the horses down into it, out of the worst wind. Once down, they could think for the first time in an hour. "How far to the Anderson place?" Billy asked, his lips blue, words slurred. "1.5 miles, maybe 2. Thomas checked the horses. His face told them everything. 3 horses are done. Maybe an hour left. The other 2 might make it carrying 1 person each. The math was brutal. 5 men. 2 horses that might survive. 1.5 miles through killing cold. "2 of us ride for the trading post," Jack said. "Fast as we can, get a fire going, come back with supplies for the others." "And the other 3? Marcus asked. "Stay here with the dying horses. Use their bodies for warmth. Huddle together." "Wait," Billy looked sick. "That's not... It's the only way all of us might survive," Thomas said quietly. "If we all try to walk, we all die. If we all ride, the horses fail halfway. This way, maybe we all make it. Who rides and who stays?" Jack knew it had to be him. He was the leader, knew the exact location. But the second person... Billy was too far gone, shaking uncontrollably. Dutch couldn't navigate. That left Marcus or Thomas. Marcus spoke first. "I'll stay. I've been colder than this." A lie they all recognized, the kind brave men tell so others don't carry the weight of choosing. Thomas shook his head. "You're stronger. You have a better chance on the ride." Jack watched them argue over who got to take the greater risk, who got to be left in a frozen hole with dying horses and men who might not survive. The most profound act of brotherhood he'd ever witnessed. "Thomas rides with me," Jack said. "Marcus, you're in charge. Keep them alive. "We'll be back before dark." They transferred supplies to the men staying. Extra blankets, dried food, the flask of whiskey that might buy a few minutes of warmth. Jack looked back one last time. Billy and Dutch huddled against a horse. Marcus stood apart, back straight despite the cold, watching with eyes that held no fear, only determination. The ride was a blur of pain and ice. Jack lost feeling in his hands after 10 minutes. His horse stumbled twice, and each time he was certain it was over. But each time the animal found something deep inside, some reserve of will that pushed forward. When they finally saw the stone walls rising from the white landscape, Jack felt tears freeze on his cheeks. Getting inside was its own battle. The door was frozen shut. They broke a window and climbed through, frozen hands barely gripping the frame. Once inside, out of the wind, maybe only 20 below, instead of 50. It felt like heaven. Thomas built the fire while Jack rubbed feeling into his hands. Old furniture for fuel, matches kept dry in Thomas's innermost layer. When flames caught, something in Jack's chest unclenched. They didn't rest. As soon as the fire was strong, they loaded blankets and food and rope. Their horses were dead, collapsed as soon as their riders dismounted. Jack felt grief for the animals that had given everything, but there wasn't time. They made the journey back on foot, carrying everything they could. The cold was worse now, sun dropping, temperature falling. Jack's legs moved mechanically, mind focused on one thing, the men waiting. When they reached the wallow, they found a sight that would haunt Jack forever. 3 horses down, bodies freezing solid. Billy and Dutch pressed against one, barely conscious. And Marcus stood over them, back to the wind, body positioned to block the cold from the younger men. Marcus turned when he heard them. His face was covered in frost, eyes barely able to open. "Took you long enough," he said, something like a smile in his voice. They wrapped the 3 men in blankets, forced hot food into them, got them moving. Billy could barely walk. Dutch was crying, speaking confused German, but Marcus helped, supporting Billy while Thomas took the other side. The journey back took twice as long. They stopped every few hundred yards to warm Billy and Dutch, rubbing limbs, keeping them conscious. The sun was setting, temperature dropping towards 60 below, but they made it. All 5 stumbled through the broken window, collapsed before the fire, and for a long time no one spoke. They just breathed, felt warmth slowly return, existed in the miracle of being alive. 3 days before the cold broke enough to reach the Harrison Ranch. 3 days tending frostbite, rationing food, keeping the fire burning. Billy lost 2 toes, Dutch lost part of his ear. Marcus's face would carry scars forever. When they finally reached the ranch, Mr. Harrison met them at the gate. His face fell, seeing 5 men, no cattle, no horses, nothing he'd paid for. "Lost them all, did you?" Harrison said coldly. Jack thought about the decision in the line shack, the ride through killing cold, Marcus standing watch while he slowly froze. He thought about brotherhood and sacrifice. "Yes, sir," Jack said. "We lost the cattle, lost the horses, lost everything except ourselves." Harrison's face hardened. "Then you lost what I paid you to save." "We survived the coldest night in Montana history," Thomas interrupted, his voice quiet but weighted. "We survived minus 55 degrees. We survived when we should have died. Every one of us made choices that kept someone else alive. So keep your money, Mr. Harrison. We're already richer than you'll ever be." They turned and walked away, 5 men who'd been strangers, now bound by something stronger than any contract. Jack never worked for Harrison again. None of them did. But for the rest of his life, whenever winter came and the temperature dropped, he'd think about that night, about the decision to split up, about the courage to both ride into danger and stay behind in it, about how survival isn't making it through alone, but being willing to risk everything so others can make it through with you. Years later, an old man in California, his grandchildren would ask about the scars on his hands, the crooked way he walked, and he'd tell them about the coldest night in the Wild West, about 5 men and impossible choices. "The thing about that night," he'd say, watching California's sun through the windows, "is that we could have made different choices. Stayed together and frozen, pushed forward together and died in the open, decided it was every man for himself. But we didn't. We chose to trust each other, to sacrifice for each other, to believe brotherhood was worth risking death for, and that choice, that decision to value each other over our own safety, that's what saved us. Not the horses, not luck, not even the trading post. It was deciding we'd rather die trying to save each other than survive by abandoning each other. And in the telling, his grandchildren would understand. The Wild West wasn't won by the strongest or toughest, or those who looked out only for themselves. It was survived by the ones who understood that in the coldest, darkest moments, the only real warmth comes from the people willing to stand in the wind so others might live.
Seviyorum da o que